Thank you all for being here and good morning. About 5 years ago, we gathered in this room for a power breakfast titled The Talent War. And at the time, it was an effort to help push the conversation and raise awareness for businesses and business leaders to recognize that on the horizon, they'd be feeling this immense competition to attract and retain the best and brightest talent. In fact, I remember one of the catalysts for that event was Partnership CEO Jay Byers at an event maybe the year prior to that, holding up a copy of the book, The Coming Jobs War, and mentioning that was going to be the number one thing that we were going to be talking about as a community. And you've seen that in this community, how we've all rallied around that from the CBB on through the partnership and other organizations. I took a look back at the coverage of that event, and although it might seem hard to believe now, a major theme of the event was how the pendulum was just beginning to swing toward employees who, as the labor market was beginning to tighten 5 years after the recession, they were realizing that they had more power and leverage to both demand better workplace culture and more confidence to go out into the community looking for new jobs. In the time since, no topic has been more dissected, written about, and discussed than talent development and retention. It's absolutely been the number one pain point for businesses. But 5 years later, competition for top talent is overheating again, and across all skill levels of jobs. Organizations are searching for new sources of employees. Companies and cities are voluntarily increasing minimum wages, and wages are beginning to show signs of increasing at businesses. But if you think that war is fierce now, get ready, because some of the data, and Catherine alluded to some of it, it shows that it's likely to get even more competitive. Many of the efforts that are underway in the city are to broaden our employment base and tackle the issue, and I'm sure we're going to touch on some of those today, but there's no one silver bullet or singular program to solve that macro challenge. But while those efforts are going on, you've got a business to run, you've got employees to hire, and a workforce to grow. Today our panel of experts is going to help you take a look to the future, to help you best understand how the employment market is going to be changing, but also how your business is going to be able to compete and attract and, of course, retain within that labor market. We've got a fantastic panel for you today. Directly to my right is Julia Garlick. She's an assistant professor of economics for the University of Iowa. She's going to play a role in helping us understand some of the economic data that's out there for the workforce. Directly next to her is Mary Bontrager. She's the executive vice president of talent development at the Greater Des Moines Partnership. She's one of two returning panelists from our 2014 event. Directly next to Mary is Tom Mahoney. Tom is the chairman and CEO of the ITA Group, which beyond being a fantastic employer, has also done some extensive research into retention strategies. Matt McDonald, he's the director of talent acquisition at Workiva, a company that has been rapidly growing and competing for national talent, so he'll have some insight into what they're doing to try to recruit. Beth Townsend, she's the director of the Iowa Workforce Development, which of course has been working on a variety of macro efforts to help with the challenge here in the state. And lastly is David Lito. He's the president of Palmer Group, a staffing and recruiting firm, and he's our second returning panelist from 2014. And in a sign of how important workplace culture and work-life balance is, David has some exciting news today, but unfortunately means he's going to be having to step out early today. So David, you want to talk a little bit about what you're getting to go do today?
Sure. Is this on? Okay. So it's a secret, so nobody can say.
Wrong place for secrets.
So my 7th grade son is winning a award in front of the whole school for his academic achievement. So, yeah. His dad never had that issue, but I need to be there for that. So it's at 9 o'clock, so I'm gonna sneak out about 8:30.
Yeah, so if Dave sneaks out a little early, it's not because he's gotten mad at any of the panelists, or maybe he will.
He doesn't know yet, so that's pretty secret. So everybody else knows.
All right, so to begin today, what I've asked Julia to help kind of set a solid foundation for us. There's a lot of employment numbers, a lot of statistics out there, but I wanted her to help provide us a few data trends, particularly for Des Moines and for the state. So she's going to help frame up the discussion for us. She's going to go first. After that, I'm going to ask a question for the full panel. But do remember, this is a Q&A with you in the audience, so after that first question or two, I'm going to be opening it up, and as I always say, we've got a couple roving mics to make sure that everybody can hear the question. But as I always say, if you want to make sure your question gets asked, be that first person, because that's always the hardest person to get to raise their hand. So be ready with those questions. So Julia, why don't you go ahead and kick it off?
Thanks, Chris, and good morning, everyone. How close are I?
Go ahead and pull that a little closer. There you go.
Right, for the terminally short. Good morning. So when Chris asked me to pull together a few statistics on what the Iowa labor market looked like and specifically what the Des Moines labor market looked like, one of the things that struck me as I started looking at the Des Moines data in particular is that in many ways it seems like part of what you have is an information problem. Des Moines pays better than a lot of similarly sized Midwest cities. It has lower unemployment, as I'm sure you're all aware. And it showed up on no fewer than 3 separate hipster blogs about the surprising cool places to live. And in some ways, what's striking is that if you ask people about, what is the labor market like in Iowa, you won't get that sort of information. You'll get the information that, there simply isn't a lot of kind of competition on the pay scale. So for instance, a lot of the types of jobs that operate in Des Moines, if you look at the Iowa stats overall, people are getting paid something like 85 to 89 cents to the dollar on the national average. That's after controlling for living expenses. So if you just looked at statistics on Iowa and you weren't thinking about Des Moines specifically, you wind up with this picture that certainly fits with what a lot of my students at University of Iowa think, which is that if you want to get paid well, you need to leave Iowa and go somewhere else. So that was the first thing that struck me. More broadly, I would like to comment on, unfortunately I think the simple shortage isn't necessarily kind of a matter of just attempting to get people from Wisconsin to move here. The relatively low unemployment rate is pretty much a Midwest trend. Iowa is a bit lower than average. Des Moines is ever so slightly higher than Iowa overall in terms of its unemployment rates. But there's no obvious pool of people to pull from in the Midwest region. Again, what was striking when you start looking at the city levels, however, was that, again, a lot of these comparably sized cities with pretty comparable labor markets, if you're looking in terms of occupational breakdown, have pretty high unemployment rates. For instance, if you could persuade someone from Kansas City to come out and interview with you, in Kansas City itself, the unemployment rate is on the order of 6%. So, you've got a certain amount of flexibility there. The other thing I also wanted to emphasize is that one of the kind of the stylized facts that most economists will tell you is that the Midwest, or part of the Midwest problem, is that you're losing population. If you look at your age profile of the US overall relative to Iowa specifically, you've got this fabulous little dip for people aged 24 to 35. And that isn't because for some reason people just didn't have babies in a particular decade. It's that a big part of what happens is that the population that grows up here leaves here. And again, when you're thinking about how do you address the labor market, as much as marketing yourself as a company to your existing pool of applicants, it's worth thinking about where do those applicants come from. In some ways, we've got kind of a wider supply side problem. So if you can somehow connect to other labor markets where the supply side is a bit looser, you'll make their lives a lot easier. And that's pretty much my summary. Poach people from Alabama.
Thank you, Julia. So my first question for the panel, and what I'd like, Mary, I'll have you go ahead and start. It's just if you could identify one employment trend that you're watching that businesses need to be aware of.
Great. Well, thank you, Chris. Thank you for the opportunity.
Let's see. Give it one more shot.
Yeah. You can hear me?
Why don't you trade with Julia for a moment? We'll see if we get that one going. There you go.
Very good, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. I would just want to share, in 2014 when I was here, we did talk about the importance of placemaking, and we still continue to talk about that. And so thank you, Greg, for bringing that up, because today's talent does choose place first, job second. And to your point, Julia, it is about information, and we all have a role to share in telling that story of what is unique about DSM USA and some of our attributes. But on the trends side, I would definitely just go back to what Catherine said about population. And just in the upper Midwest, we obviously, for the most part, are stagnant, or in some cases, our population growth is coming from predominantly foreign-born in many, many locations across the upper Midwest. And so, a trend that I think we all have to be paying attention to is immigration and our ability to attract and retain foreign-born. So when we look at even who's being educated on our campuses here in central Iowa, and certainly University of Iowa, of just in the Des Moines metro area, we have about 5,000 undergrad students that are being educated here that are foreign-born, and we're retaining less than 5% of them. And so there's a tremendous opportunity there that there are challenges, but we certainly need to be looking at some of these pockets of opportunity for us. If we look at, and I put this out as a bit of a challenge to the group so that we all become better educated about immigration policy and the conversations around a need to reform and modernize our immigration system, which has been in place since 1960. And when we look at, from a competition standpoint, in the US, only 14% of our immigrants come here for economic reasons. But you look at Canada, and 63% of their immigrants are there for economic reasons, fill jobs. And Australia, 67%. So we have opportunity to do some changes in that system because native-born populations across the country are not increasing, and the statistics that you gave, that's only shrinking more. So that is a trend, and I think an opportunity for all of us to really look at that. And then I just mentioned, and maybe we'll have an opportunity to go into this a little more, but the trend that's coming at all of us, excuse me, is the impact and augmentation of automation and AI. And what is that meaning for the training and education of our future workforce, but more importantly, those that are currently employed in DSM USA. So I know I snuck in too, but.
All right, Tom?
Good morning. So I'm a linear thinker, so I'd like to just suggest everybody embrace what some of the other comments are. Number one is we need to continue to invest in our community. This is a regional issue, and we need to make sure that people want to live and play and work in central Iowa. So when you think about what Catch Des Moines and Greater Des Moines are doing, they're embracing the concept of investing in our community with amenities that are going to cause people to want to stay here. Growing our population is the second key element to that. If we can create the right environment, we can be a net importer. I remember graduating from the University of Iowa, and the majority of our students were talking about how they wanted to leave Iowa. That's no longer the trend, but unless we continue to invest in our community, it will become one. A state of 3 million people, we just simply don't have enough people living here to sustain the quality of life that we want going forward. And so finding ways to bring workers here is a really positive thing for all of us. The third thing that I want to introduce is that when we think about talent engagement, in order to recruit, it's just not about salary and compensation and benefits. ITA Group has evolved in a company to become an engagement solution agency, and we have a research firm that's been doing a lot of work in this space. Much has been written about talent acquisition engagement, but companies are struggling on how to activate on it. And what we're doing is helping organizations create best practices so that they can activate on what it's going to take to be able to retain talent. In 2018, one of the trends in engagement around talent is that 1 out of 3 people quit their jobs. There's a known trend that there's a reality that there's a slump where people after 2 to 3 years of being with an employer quit their jobs. That's 38 million people in 2018. They're expecting that number to grow by 2020 to over 48 million people, where we're having to hire, train, and develop only to see that terrific talent leave. And in order for us to attract people through the front door, we've got to close the back door of our organizations to ensure that people want to find meaningful, purposeful work within your organization. And we believe that takes culture work, and we believe it also takes organizational identity. Having team members identify with the mission and purpose of your organization. And so my focus is really, in order to attract, you've got to retain.
Matt?
Yeah, Matt McDonald. To give you a little bit of my background, just so you know where my perspective's coming from today. Been with Workiva about 1.5 years in talent acquisition. Before that, a principal for 6.5 years, also in talent acquisition. And then the 3.5 to 4 years before that was in the search firm world, working for a company called Tech Systems. So I've had the benefit of seeing the talent landscape from different perspectives, being, looking for contemporary or contract consultant work, looking for full-time work, and now with Workiva. So when I look at some trends that are happening now, and ones that I think is going to continue, it can have both a positive and a challenging spin to it, and it plays a little bit off what Tom is saying, is that when we're recruiting people, we're now seeing that companies are doing a better job of taking care of their top talent. Not everyone, but we are seeing that companies are doing a better job. So that, coupled with the fact that unemployment's 2.4% or around there, and you have a smaller amount of those really talented people that want to leave their company because they're being taken care of by their current company. So it's a very good trend for people in the room that are doing a great job of taking care of their top talent, and that should absolutely continue. But it's also a scary trend for people that are trying to recruit people because not as many people want to leave. And that's the trend that I'm seeing in the talent acquisition side. So it's kudos to the companies that are doing it well. There's also kind of an opportunity for companies that aren't doing it as well to step up their game going forward, because if they're not, then companies, like Workiva, like others, as we're trying to attract talent, it's the ones that aren't being treated really well at their current employers that are coming to us or that are open to our phone calls or messages. So that's the trend I'm seeing, and I believe it will continue.
Beth?
So I did a quick look on the internet to see what the unemployment rate was in March of 2014, and it was 4.4%. So it was almost double where we are at 2.4% currently in Iowa. And as all of your jazz hands just demonstrated this morning, we are desperate to find workers. And what the trend that I see for successful companies are those that are developing that talent internally and that are creating opportunities to engage in the talent development process, not only within their own company, but also in their communities. So they're getting involved with work-based learning opportunities and working with their local high schools. They're getting involved with programs like IJAG and the Evelyn K. Davis Center, and they're bringing in kids from low-income or underrepresented communities to show them their workplace, and this is someplace you can live and succeed, and you can do these jobs. And so by creating those opportunities within their own business, they are ensuring that, number one, people are going to want to stay and work because they have that sense of investment, not only in their work but also within their community. But they're also helping to convince kids that you don't have to go somewhere else to get really cool jobs. You don't have to leave the state of Iowa. You can stay in Iowa because we have so many great opportunities for our kids here in Iowa. And for those adults who haven't received any post-secondary education, that are in your workforce, that are good employees, those are exactly the employees you want to recruit to and help them get upskilled so that you can grow that talent pipeline internally.
We're seeing from the employment perspective, I've been in the employment business for 20 years. We are seeing our clients are wanting a specific talent or specific position to be hired, but they're hiring now at a lesser of a skill level. So your point on upskilling, they're hiring somebody, maybe even giving them the same job title, but paying them a little less to train them for what they want them to become. So we're seeing clients now being more willing and and open to hire not that perfect match in the hopes of grooming them for the future. And then, the gig economy, we talk about that or hear about that, contract labor. I've seen a stat that a third of the workforce is somehow involved in contract or gig labor. It's a big number, and that's going to continue. You think of Lyft and Uber, and those are all kind of included in that, and along with all of our companies that hire contractors, temp labor to help. So I see that trend continuing to grow and increase, specifically when you're looking for a skill. You may not have it, it may be hard to find, and those people like their flexibility and want to work when and how they want to. And that's going to continue to change the landscape of our employment sector here. So you need to hold on for that.
So you all touched on the increasing pressures that we're feeling, whether it's population or whether it's internal type of challenges. I wonder if, I imagine you believe that competition is going to continue to increase, but I wonder if you do, and maybe David, if you could take a first stab at this, but what do you think some of the effects might be for businesses of this current environment?
For the competition piece?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're, we talked earlier about the war on talent and the word fighting. Companies are fighting for people, especially if they have exactly what they need. And what we're seeing companies throw lots of dollars out. While culture is really important, sometimes it's hard to sell that piece, to get them in the door. So we're seeing salaries and technical positions starting to rise. Companies are getting competitive in how they do it. We're seeing more, of course, internships and trying to groom people, speaking at more colleges. It's really trying to get a well-rounded approach on how you find talent, educate them on your company, and groom them along the process. So it is certainly a competitive market, and we've had some really interesting conversations with our candidates about their career aspirations, and really that $30,000 increase to switch jobs at a lateral move is happening. So it's pretty interesting.
Matt, I wonder what you're kind of seeing from an attraction recruiting standpoint on whether you think what some of the effects of this increased competition is going to be.
Yeah, it's forced companies to get a lot more creative on how they're recruiting talent. David mentioned the internship program, and while that's not a creative or new solution, it's bringing in people from outside of Iowa, bringing people from all over the country for your internship programs, and helping them fall in love with Iowa, and helping them fall in love with your company. It's helped us attract some people that we never would have had a chance to attract in the past. And it's also being a lot more creative on what we're doing with our internal workforce and giving people opportunities that, while on paper they may not be the best fit for, they have the competencies and the skills that they've established within our company. So giving them new opportunities to fill some of those gaps that may have been extremely difficult to fill if we went to the outside and tried to find someone there. So be more creative with your internal talent, and then doing what you can to bring people in at that intern age, because that's when they're most mobile, that's when they're most impressionable, and we have some people that are with us that never thought they would live in Iowa, that never thought they would want to work for a company in Ames. But they had an amazing summer, they had amazing couple summers, they met lifelong friends, spouses, whatever it might be, and then they stayed with us. So that's an exciting way that we're bringing in new talent, and we'll need to continue to do that.
Tom, how about you from a perspective of running a company? I'm sorry, from the perspective of running a company, what do you think some of the effects of that increased competition is going to be?
I think businesses today spend a lot of time talking about what their value prop is for their client. We need to spend more time talking about what is the employer value proposition. If you think about the psychology of the benefits a team member is looking at, they're really looking at three things. One is, as Dave mentioned, it's the functional benefits. It's the salary. You're going to get them in the door by talking about employee salary and training and benefits. But the other component of this is the emotional connection that you believe you're going to be able to focus on to cause that person to feel emotionally connected to not only their job, but they feel that their job is going to have an impact on advancing the company's mission and vision. And then the third psychological benefit is then how do they identify? So, it really boils down to what does that team member want to do with their vocation, and then how are you going to make them feel as it relates to being a part of your organization, and do they believe they are connected to something bigger than them, and how do they identify to their job in the organization and making a difference? in our community.
And we talked a little bit, hearing some conflicting things to a certain degree. So wages, we've talked about that's not going to be the end all be all, right?
Right.
At the same time, you have to have a good company culture. So I'm curious, maybe Julie, if you have some more information. You mentioned and you touched on where we kind of stand. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what you're seeing from wages. Especially how Des Moines might compare.
So I'm not entirely sure kind of what stats you're looking for precisely, but just to kind of give you a sense of an overview. Honestly, I was surprised. I pretty much pulled out a random sample of similarly sized Midwest towns, and Des Moines pays very, very competitively, in particular since the cost of living is so low here. What is noteworthy, I suppose the other thing worth commenting on, Iowans seem to get a relatively large share of their kind of total compensation package in the form of wages. So potentially, if you're looking at kind of a market whose interests in what they want to get from a job are changing, you might then think that, you know, maybe this is important, maybe against all expectations, 23-year-olds really do want to have a discussion about health insurance or what the employer matching contributions are going to be. So I agree, you can't overlook the importance of money, and you know, certainly a lot of people will, when they're going through potential places to apply, they're looking at Glassdoor and they're seeing what people get paid. But once you get them in the door, then a lot more of it becomes about selling them on your specific company. And I genuinely think that has relatively little to do, excuse me, that has relatively little to do with wages. So the other noteworthy thing about Des Moines in particular was that within educational categories, so for instance, among people with a bachelor's degree in the sciences, or a bachelor's degree from graduating from business school, there's relatively low variation in wages in Iowa, and Des Moines in particular. So I'm throwing it out there. I'm not quite sure what to do with that piece of information, but it does suggest that either companies are all perfectly keeping pace with each other in their efforts to pay people more, or that we're not yet really seeing a big pickup in wages in response to kind of the more recent declines in available labor.
Tom?
Yeah, I'd like to respond to that. You know, Chris, when you think about salary, everybody here knows that it's important to get somebody in the door. You have to be competitive. But I'll just use ITA as our own case study on the importance of culture and making that identity connection. ITA has won 3 awards this past year, one for a great place to work for small to medium-sized companies for 750 team members. We're also a great place to work for women. And we're also recognized as a great place for consulting. And our retention rate is over 90%. And so when you think about the importance of culture, it starts by taking care of your existing team. And I just ask everybody, when you go back to work today, take a look at your tenure rates. See what your tenure is overall. And then look at the reality of the slump. Take a look at what your turnover rate is for team members that have 1 to 2 years of experience with you, and see where it is. My bet is that it's probably among the highest turnover percentage of your tenure workforce, and they're leaving because they don't see a future. It's not because they're chasing a paycheck. They don't see a future. Invest in them, give them a future, and they'll stay.
David?
To Tom's point, culture is by far more important than a paycheck. You know, just throwing money at people. There's no doubt, no question at all. We're seeing candidates not only if their culture's bad, but they're leaving, of course. We're seeing big pay increases. We're also seeing on the other scale people taking lateral moves or less money to go work for a company that has a better reputation. So we see both ends of that spectrum. You asked for some stats on salaries, which I pulled. Over the last decade, Iowa's seen a 27.5% wage increase, which is, I thought was pretty staggering. And the median income, which that increase is higher than 42 other states. Median income in Iowa is $60,616, which is 17th in the nation. So I thought those numbers were more than I would have expected from our state, from the information that I saw. And we do a salary guide every year. Over the past 5 years, the highest salary increase that employers seem to be giving is that 3 to 4%, and that's been a continuous deal with over half of our respondents stating that. So salaries are steadily increasing, but they're not typically going crazy. In some technical situations, they are, but so that's what we're seeing.
So what I'd like to do now is go ahead and open up for questions from the crowd. So who's got the first question? Yes, right up here up front.
I'm curious to know the stats about the age of Iowa's employment, and then after that, best practices for how do you engage a multi-generational workplace?
So the question is, and maybe Julia, if you could take the first crack at it, the age of our workforce and what some of the breakdowns look like, and then how we can deal with multi-generations in the workforce as well. That one we'll send along that way.
So to some extent, if you looked at a graph, you can tell I'm an academic. I want a graph. What's really remarkable about Iowa is you see it kind of behaving pretty much like the majority of the rest of the Midwest for people under 18, pretty similar to the rest of the Midwest in the 18 to 26 range. But once you start looking at young adults, and this is also the age group that perhaps is finishing up their third year at their first job and maybe looking around and thinking whether or not this is where they want to stay. That group is where we see a relatively large dip in Iowa. And to be fair, a lot of states, particularly in the Midwest or in the Plains region, see a similar dip. But Iowa does have a fairly substantial one relative to places like Wisconsin, relative to Illinois. The good news is we look very similar to the majority. So it's not kind of that Iowa is doing something very odd. And so kind of from a demography perspective, the way we interpret this is that this is the group who moves around a lot, the age group. So you're expecting them to migrate relatively easily anyway, but what's unexpected is the fact that we have a very clear out-migration trend for Iowa. Normally, you expect roughly the same amount of people to be moving in and out of an area. That gap has been steadily picking, if you look at over the last decade or so. So the missing group of workers has been pretty much kind of picking up 2009 through to about 2016. In more recent years, it's kind of holding steady or even looking like it's doing a little better in 2018. But just to kind of give you a sense of the numbers, where we'd expect Iowa to be if people weren't leaving would be kind of around about 13 to 14% of the population. Well, 13 to 14% of the overall population, a higher share of the labor force in this age range of 26 to 35. What we're seeing in the data, however, is something around 10%. So you're missing a pretty substantial chunk of these people. And again, it's not that they don't exist, it's that they leave for some reason. So I suppose that's the main takeaway from migration. You've got a very specific age group who's moving, and it's not a trend that's going away.
One thing that, I think it was last week, Des Moines, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, Des Moines was the #1 Midwest city in terms of growth, but at 1.6%. And so when you really stop and think about that, you you might be the fastest growing Midwest city, but you're growing at 1.6%. So I think that's an interesting overlay too, that it kind of takes a look at between the state and the city aspect as well.
And Chris, if
Yeah.
I could just touch on that, I think that is a good point, because the Des Moines metro area is a bit of an outlier in that we are growing, and compared to our peer competition across the Midwest, we are the fastest growing Midwestern city, and our fastest growing age demographic is 25 to 34-year-olds, to the point where our median age is now less than Silicon Valley. So we are a bit of an outlier.
More questions from the audience? Yeah, right over here.
So in light of the talent wars, what can education, in particular maybe even high school level, do to retain students or develop them?
Beth, you want to talk a little bit about what Workforce Development's doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So what business can do is engage with their local high school, engage with their local community colleges. There's my shout out, Rob. But there are lots of opportunities for businesses to engage with high school students, but I would submit to you, you also need to be touching the middle school kids, and maybe even younger than that, because the younger we can show opportunities in Iowa, the more likely they are to stay in Iowa. So what's going around, or going as a trend in education around Iowa, are looking for those work-based learning opportunities, like STEM Best, where business and education are involved in STEM projects. We're putting up a work-based learning clearinghouse starting July 1st, where employers can post virtual projects and work with high schoolers around the state on projects, and it will hopefully also provide an inventory of businesses that want to get engaged in work-based learning, and provide better access or easier access between business and education. But the trend is for business, they are getting a lot more involved in the education process, and I think that's a good trend that needs to continue to happen, because we no longer can just have our kids in a silo in high school, have our kids in a silo in college, and then graduate and turn them loose into the workplace and think that the businesses are going to be able to whip them into shape and teach them what they need to know. We need to be working together at a much earlier stage to create those relationships, and also make sure that when they graduate, they're work ready.
Chris, if I could
Yeah.
add to that real quick. When I was a principal, I was very involved in the Hyperstream program and had the opportunity to work with multiple schools in the local market and this was focused on technology, but take technology professionals into the high schools and show those students a career path, bring in people that they can relate to and want to be like, and also help show them whether they wanted to be a nurse, a graphic designer, a farmer, whatever it might be, that technology played a component in that role, and helping tie what their career aspirations to roles that they could have here in the state of Iowa. So that was my plug for the Hyperstream program is I think it makes a huge impact, and it also gave us a chance to impact hundreds of kids and show them that regardless of what you want to do with your career, there's an opportunity for you here in Iowa, and we can help show you a path to it. So continuing to get involved with that for the schools and the companies, would definitely recommend that.
Tom, you talked a little bit in our pre-event meeting about ITA Group and actually using that as a pipeline for potential future employees, and that you guys actually do try to track them and where they're going and make sure that they could possibly be employees. Can you talk a little bit about that and what the sales pitch would be? Because a lot of times as a small business, you're saying yes, we know it's good to invest in the future long term, but it can also be hard to look for, well, what's the actual return going to be to my business?
It's just communication. There's just a misunderstanding of what the possibilities are right here in central Iowa. And so what we want to do is expose young students to the type of business that we have here in Iowa, and the really cool work that they can do for organizations across the globe. We operate programs at ITA in 84 different countries and 15 different languages, and we have students come in from North High that are blown away that a company like ITA exists. And I would say this other thing, it's also across all generations. We have people that have been in the workforce for 20 years that don't understand ITA, and they may have some great talent, but need to be reskilled. And so having a commitment to ongoing education is really important.
Well, Dave is getting to the end of his time with us here, so I want to give you a quick chance. I wonder if you looked in the crystal ball a little bit, and you were trying to advise businesses where they should be potentially maybe investing, whether it's within their business or whether it's when they're thinking about employment. I wonder where you might be advising people to be thinking about.
This is an easy one. Invest in your current staff first. Tom's talked a lot about retention of employees, and we have open positions we're trying to fill internally. We're helping our clients fill, but it is most important that we take care of our people, give them a voice. Culture, I'll say it again, is the most important thing. And I say this really at every speaking engagement I get the opportunity to have is don't forget to tell your people thank you, or nice job, or way to go, or congratulations. High fives go a long way. We love high fives. Simple stuff does make a difference. So that's what I would say. Train, develop, give them a voice, give them an opportunity to lead a committee, a group, give them an opportunity to present in front of your office. Just try to find ways to keep your current staff engaged and growing and learning and emotionally connected would be my last 2 cents.
All right, let's congratulate Dave and then send him on his way. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
More questions from the audience? Yeah, I'm going to go right over here first.
How are things looking for the trades, and is the conversation finally, it seems to maybe it's finally shifting that we need to push more kids towards the trades?
Beth, you want to talk a little bit about what you're seeing in that area?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and we do. And what's great about what's going on in Iowa is the fact that we have so many career paths that aren't necessarily tied to a four-year program, because we have so many kids that are interested in getting into the workplace faster and getting through their training a little bit faster. So we have programs going on around the state, working with trade associations, working with unions, working with non-union trade organizations to create opportunities to get high school kids familiar with the trades, because they aren't getting that familiarity often in high school anymore. And so, and maybe their parents are not, hands-on, do-it-yourself kind of parents. So we need to be able to bring them out either to the workplace or bring them to career fairs where we can show them what the trade organizations look like. The Iowa Skills Trade Association had a Build Your Future program about 2 weeks ago here in Des Moines, and they brought in over 1,000 kids, and they had different stations around the Varied Industries building and showed them all the different things that go on in a trade job that they may be interested in doing. Some of them even had video games that they were using that the kids played, and it was teaching them how to read blueprints. So we do need to do a better job of exposing kids to those great opportunities, high skills, and projected growth in the trades. And we also need to be educating parents about the opportunity. We need to get over this bias that we somehow created in the 80s and 90s, that the only sign of success for your kid is to graduate from a four-year college. That's really no longer the case, because there are many great jobs, as Mr. Benson would tell you, that you can get with a two-year degree or less that make more than what you would get from a four-year degree and have better growth and will adapt faster as we increase our technology.
Great, more questions? Yeah, right up front here. You first, yeah.
So as more companies have a focus on diversity and inclusion, justifiably so, how do they overcome the challenges if the best candidate that applied doesn't fit inside of that particular policy?
Matt, or maybe
I'll start with that one. So my advice to my hiring leaders and our business has always been to hire the best person possible, and I'll stick with that one. So when we look at trying to increase our diversity inclusion efforts, it starts in-house. It starts that the employees that come to work at Workiva feel like they can bring their best self, feel like they're fully included regardless of what they bring to the table. So it starts with taking care of our own people, because then when people want to apply, regardless of how they affiliate, if they can see themselves at that company, if they can see other people like them that are welcomed at that company, then they're going to apply and they're going to want to work there. So the diversity inclusion efforts do not prevent us from hiring the best person regardless of where they fit, or however you said that. But we want to hire the best person regardless, but we want to make sure that our leaders, as they're hiring people and as they're considering people, that they have that mindset of, let's not just add someone to our team that's exactly like who we have. Let's see, can we do a culture add here? Can we bring something that the team's missing? And if they go at it from that perspective and hire the most talented person, then we're going to end up with a diverse workforce. So that's the approach that we take.
Yeah, Beth?
I think the other thing to take a look at is to make sure that you are diversifying your recruitment so that you can diversify your applicant pool. So maybe figure out ways to get into communities that you're not getting into, because I guarantee you the talent is out there in our diverse communities. It's just we don't always do a great job of making them aware of those opportunities so that they can apply and be as equally as competitive.
Matt, you talked about something Workiva is doing where you are partnering with colleges outside of the state of Iowa as a way to potentially reach some other different types of diverse populations. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that and what's behind that.
Yeah, I don't have the exact data or a graph, Julia, but I can tell you that it's very obvious that in Des Moines and Iowa we have a limited percentage-wise diverse workforce compared to some other markets around the country. So we leverage our offices in Scottsdale, in Denver, in different areas across the country where we can then get on campus and attract a more diverse workforce because the pool is bigger there. And so it's just the fact that depending on where you're fishing, if you're fishing the same pond all the time and it's got a very small percentage of the workforce you're looking for, then you're going to continue to get that small percentage. If you can go out to other ponds where there is a larger percentage of a diverse workforce, then that can help increase our overall diversity. So we've taken that approach and it's definitely paid off.
It also strikes me that while we talk about unemployment being at 2%, somebody the other day talked about African American unemployment here in Iowa being at about 14%. And unemployment also, of course, is a measure of people that are actively looking for jobs. So there's other pools that might not be looking for jobs at the moment. So I wonder if you could talk about what maybe some additional pools of people right here that we maybe should be taking a look at trying to attract back into the workforce.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are seeing that gap shrink a little bit just by virtue of the demand. But we certainly do have untapped talent pools out there where there are discrepancies in those unemployment rates. So when we do look at the African American community and other ethnic-based communities, our former incarcerated communities, these individuals are receiving skills training and they're coming out ready for jobs, but are having a difficult time in many cases finding employment opportunities. Again, I mentioned our foreign-born, persons with disabilities. And at one point in time, not that long ago, we had a big gap between our veterans unemployment rate, those that were our returning soldiers, and our regular unemployment rate, but with very intentional efforts by the business community and working with those individuals, we have brought that down to almost an equal unemployment rate. So we know we can do it, and to the point of there are pockets out there that they aren't being counted in the unemployment rate. They have just pulled themselves away, so we need to re-engage them. We can't afford to leave them on the sidelines.
Any other pools that you would be targeting to look at as possible for possible employment?
Well, I agree that we do have to expand our net, and so we are on campuses all across the U.S. Certainly in the Midwest, but expanding beyond that, and looking at campuses that do have a higher diverse population. Just in general, with our digital marketing campaign, the ability to just get more eyeballs and diverse eyeballs on our community has been quite successful. So the attraction of new people that we are bringing to our website just from our digital marketing campaign, 99% of those are new users, new eyeballs on our community. So we're doing that through targeted marketing of geographic areas, demographic areas, geofencing, conferences that have a specific audience. So the Black MBA conferences, the National Black MBA Conference, Women in Technology. So there are ways that tech can really help us better target those new demographics.
Julie, are there any areas that you've looked at in some of your employment work that maybe employers should be looking at?
I think we've kind of touched on most of the larger groups already. More generally, I would just kind of, going back to the, you hire the best candidate who applies for a job, and then linking that back to this whole idea that a big part of attracting and keeping workers is workplace culture, that when you're targeting minority groups, or women aren't precisely a minority, but when you're targeting an underrepresented group, you can't necessarily just go with, hey, we're a great place for anyone to work. It's worth directly addressing the fact that no one at your company looks like them, or only 20% of your company looks like them. Simply because otherwise it's the elephant in the room and you wind up with people not applying for jobs that they could get hired for because they look at this and say, this company doesn't hire people like me. So I suppose the takeaway is, in some ways, this is again going to be a targeting issue, as Mary was saying. If you want to attract the minority groups, then you do in fact have to directly target them.
And I would just add to that, you're right, the targeting, but it is about the message. So it's the culture of the company, it's the culture of the community. So when we are targeting, we are showing them that they can see themselves here in our community. They can connect to the people and the amenities and the opportunities that are here. So that is where the storytelling really comes into play. And we need those diverse voices in our region helping to tell our story so they can see this is a place for me.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
I think one of the byproducts of unemployment is that it's going to force our community to get better at this. It's going to be a really positive outcome. Diversity, it just makes communities and organizations stronger. Having different people with different backgrounds and thought processes is just a really positive thing. The spirit of inclusiveness is really important across, all walks of life. We all want to feel like we're included, but we do need to make some intentional moves as organizations. If you were to take a look at open positions, and you take a look at the experience requirements that many companies are asking for, you've already eliminated your ability to potentially recruit from diverse communities because they don't have the experience. You're going to have to, we're as organizations are going to have to get better at making those emotional connections and making sure that from a value character standpoint, they're a good fit to your organization, but then invest in them to develop the skills that you're going to need to get the job done. Because there's just certain communities that they weren't raised with the exposure of either education, or they weren't exposed to the industries or businesses that we have jobs for.
Two other pools that I've heard come up at a couple different events. One is the retiree population. So Tom, maybe you'll be on the market. But Vermeer, I believe, does a program where their retirees are invited back in, and they actually use them to go do international work, so they get to travel and also then do some training internationally too. So maybe some interesting ways to use the retiree population. And then one thing that James Chung, he was an economist that came into town last fall, he talked about women, working women in that age demographic where they're ready to start families, and making a specific effort. Des Moines has a lot of support systems that make it a really good place to raise a family. So specifically using that as an area to go out and try to target those families to bring back to town. And that's actually something I think Mary, back in 2014, the boomerang families
Absolutely.
that I think we were talking about.
Yeah, and when we do look at some of those, our in-migration and where are folks coming from in that younger age demographic, it is the Chicagos and the Kansas Cities where maybe they have graduated from our institutions, looked at a different city and are choosing to come back.
More questions from the audience? Yeah, Matthew.
Have you observed a difference between what perks and benefits employers are offering and then what perks and benefits top talent is beginning to expect? And then a second part of that question is, do you have any predictions about what perks and benefits talent might be expecting maybe 10 years down the road from them? Thank you.
Matt, you want to take a shot a little bit about what you're seeing as your guys are out recruiting?
Yeah, for us, for top talent, specifically giving them equity in the company has been a big plus for us. People want to know that they're invested in the company, that the company's success is their success. So any way that you can give them equity in the company, I know that's not realistic for everyone, but any way that you can do that has allowed us to attract the top talent. Currently and looking forward is also that flexibility. You know, roughly 20% of our workforce is fully remote. Almost every other employee works somewhat remote at times. So having that ability to meet people where they're at versus expecting them to always come to you and always come to your offices has allowed us to attract top talent that maybe wouldn't have been open to living in Ames. Maybe they live in a different part of Iowa, but they don't want to move to Ames. So we have people over in the Quad Cities that work for us because they're very talented, and we're comfortable with them working from home full time, and they'll come to the office every couple weeks. So having that flexibility and giving people equity in the company have been the two biggest things for us.
Tom, anything you're seeing?
Yeah, I'd agree with both those comments. We're fortunate ITA Group is employee owned, so our team members own the company. And flexibility, work life. You know, you talk about balance, you immediately think it's 50-50, and the reality is it's work life flexibility. It's being able to stay relevant. And I think so to think about 10 years from now, my answer to that question is that with the speed of change, you better stay really, really close to your team and be willing to adjust in order for them to feel like they are connected to the organization and are making a difference and you're investing in them. So relevancy in the workforce is mission critical.
I would also say it needs to be a little flexible for where that person is in their life journey as well. So we're hearing more and more about the young professionals that aren't yet having families. 70% of them have pets. They want pet insurance because that's a major expense if something happens to your pet. So have some flexibility on where those individuals are kind of in their life space.
Yeah, absolutely.
With the student debt that many of these students are coming out of college with, are there any incentives that you are doing in your companies or you hear as a trend to help with alleviating some of that student debt while they are employed?
Matt, you seen anything on that?
I have seen some companies that do offer a certain amount per year to help pay off that debt, and I think that's great. I wish that was something that we did and something we're looking at doing, but having that debt repayment program is great because a lot of companies have where they'll reimburse for continuing expenses, but they don't address the fact that those students came in with $30,000, $40,000 of debt. So that's a trend that I would love to see picked up on more.
And they funded it this session, so it will take effect after the 1st of July, and the scholarships will be available for the fall session. There are last dollar scholarships for programs up to an associate's degree. They will pay for the difference between the cost of tuition and fees and any non-repayable financial aid in high demand jobs. And so if you're a student or you're an adult coming back and you go into these particular career fields, and IT is one of them, healthcare, advanced manufacturing, there's a list on futurereadyiowa.gov. you can go to school for free, essentially. There is a Future Ready Iowa grant program. We're working on how much grant we're going to provide, but it'll be several $1,000s to adults who have earned half of their bachelor or credit toward a bachelor degree, who will come back and finish that degree in a high demand area. So we can provide them with some financial incentive and reduce their amount of debt. There's also the Employer Innovation Fund, which is going to be a match between, for instance, if you have a tuition assistance program as an employer, you could apply for a match from the Employer Innovation Fund for these in high demand areas or a high demand job that you can't get people to go into. Or if you want to help people in your community go back to school, but transportation or childcare, or there are other barriers, you can, it's a private public partnership, so you could raise money, $5,000 for a childcare scholarship, then the state would match that with another $5,000, so now you've got $10,000 to help defray the cost of adults going back to school.
More questions? Yeah, Matt?
Mary mentioned that people choose place first, then job. Two-part question. Number one, talk a little bit about the role of arts and culture organizations, arts, culture, and heritage, what we might call Bravo organizations, in that kind of attraction and retention. And two, how can those organizations be better partners to your groups as you're trying to attract and retain talent?
Well, very, very important as a part of the entire equation, because we all have different needs, different things that will kind of fuel us and create that stickiness factor in the community that we choose to live. So arts and culture is incredibly important. Just make sure that we are continuing to message what's out there, so the awareness piece. But again, I can't stress enough, be a part of the storytelling. So, it doesn't fall on us. Jay's sitting back there and he always says, no one's gonna tell our story but us. And it's all of us telling our story, because we all bring unique perspectives, unique expertise. We never know when that one thing that I'm saying or you're saying is gonna resonate with that person that's debating between Des Moines or Chicago or Boston. So it's just really helping to ensure that we're all telling the story.
Yeah, Tom?
I'd add one more thing, and think region. It is really important as we continue to grow as Central Iowa, where the metropolitan area is about 600,000 people, and our communities and suburbs are growing. But it's really, really important when we think about these initiatives to have a regional perspective. It takes 20 minutes to get anywhere in Central Iowa, so whether the Arts Center is in Des Moines or whether it's in Windsor Heights, it shouldn't matter to us. We want an Arts Center. So think region, and if I could add one more, think water trails. That's going to be an amazing project.
And I would just add, yes, water trails. Think diversity and inclusion there as well. So, are you including those diverse voices as you continue to plan and grow our amenities here? And how does that resonate again back out to those individuals that we're trying to attract?
Matt, as you guys are out around the country trying to recruit, are there some barriers or some perceptions that you run into with candidates that you're trying to overcome, that you think could, either that are still existing, that are actual barriers, or things that are just perception based?
Yeah, there are, and this is a spot where I have probably a different perspective than Mary, and Chris said it was okay for us to disagree. So disagree is that we're seeing more people that are choosing the job over the location. And for us, that's exciting, that we're able to attract people in based on the job and the company, more so than the location, and then they fall in love with the location after that. So by enticing people in with an amazing job, an amazing opportunity, you're gonna have one or two situations. One, they're gonna fall in love with the community, the Des Moines, the water trails, the future water trails, and wanna stay here. or they're going to give you 3, 4, 5 great years of work and then move on and maybe come back. And I know retention's been a big theme, and I completely agree with it, but to me, and in my experience, to get 4 to 5 years of work experience out of a high-performing person will give your company a better ROI than a solid performer that's going to be there for 10 years. And so as hiring managers, as business leaders, we can't be afraid of hiring someone because they're not going to stay forever. Well, people don't stay forever anymore. It's a different world now where a lot of people aren't looking for a 20, 30-year company or career. They're looking for where can I get great experience, have a great time, meet great people for 4 or 5 years, and if that works out, then I'll stay longer. And so I want, and maybe I'm kind of putting my parting words into this question, but I want everyone to be open to those kind of employees, the 3, 4, 5 years that you know you can get great work out of for that time, and then hope for the best and give them the challenging work, give them the engaging work, and then hope that they stay versus saying that's a short time or they've only worked for companies for 3, 4, 5 years. I wouldn't want them for us. We do want them. Those people are very talented and can bring a unique perspective to our company. So
I think what you said there though is 4 to 5 years.
yeah.
And what I was addressing is retention, that slump is 1 to 2 years.
Right.
That's pretty expensive.
Yeah.
If you can get them to stay 4 or 5 years, you've doubled your ROI and probably doubled the opportunity to potentially have them stay.
All right, got time for one more question from the audience. Yeah, right here.
Hi, thank you for talking about this today. First of all, I want to thank Tom for touching on the global aspect. I think that's a really important aspect of our discussion today, is to talk about how can we be more competitive for the global talent war. I have a company called Worldwide Connect that specializes in developing global workforces, so I deal with this every day. So I guess my question is, or I'm more interested in knowing, what are our schools, communities, and companies doing to be more culturally competent and have the skills to be more competitive in tomorrow's global workforce?
Beth, you want to talk a little bit about some of the stuff you guys are doing?
Sure. How many of you are familiar with the IJAG program? So it's Iowa Jobs for America's Graduates. And they go into schools and they work with kids who are at risk of not graduating. And part of what the work that they do with those kids is they take them to their business partners to do work-based learning opportunities. Principal Financial is a huge partner with IJAG. So there are a number of companies and businesses in the community that are working with programs like IJAG to help address and create diversity in their workforce, but also to give those kids hope. Because it's really about convincing them that they can do this, that they don't have to live the way they've been raised, and that they have the same opportunities as anyone else as a kid going to school in Johnston. And so that's one of the things that we're doing, or that I see businesses doing, and would encourage more. I'd also encourage all businesses to get involved with an education partner, whether that's your local schools, your local K-12, whether that's a community college, whether that's a Regent or private university. Reach out and work with them. They want to work with you. That we need to take advantage of the fact that they recognize they need business engagement to help develop and drive their curriculum to make them more relevant as we move forward. So I would encourage you all to take advantage of that.
All right, we have time for, I'm going to have one more question for the panelists, and what I'd like you to answer is look in your crystal ball a little bit, push it out 5, 7 years, a little bit further out, and that can be challenging. Obviously, there's a lot of change that can occur during that time. But to think about what's maybe one thing that businesses should be thinking about or might be talking about at that point, especially when we decide to do this Power Breakfast again in 5 years, about how the talent war has ended and Des Moines is the greatest place to ever for talent, right? So that's the question. I'll give you 1 second to think about it. Just a couple things to share with everybody here today. After the event today, we're going to be taking the content from today. You see Luke up here, he's taking some video that's on Facebook, and Dwayne in the back, he's videoing the opening question from today's event. That'll be on our website, and we'll be sharing that in our e-newsletters, and our staff is going to be writing some of their takeaways from today's event. You can get all that at businessrecord.com/sign up, and that's how you can get on our daily e-newsletters. Great way if it's your first time interacting with the Business Record, great way to get plugged in. It's a free product, twice a day. Stay up to date with what's going on in the business community. Also, upcoming events. This is our second Power Breakfast of the year. Our third one won't be until November. That sounds like it's gonna be, that's a long way away. Won't be quite as nice as it is today, I'm sure. But our next event that we have is on May 30th. That's our Innovation Iowa unveiling. That's out at Corteva Agri-Science. We're gonna be unveiling the magazine. It's free to attend. You can RSVP at innovationia.com. We'd love to see you out there for that. And also, if you're a member of the Business Record, we have a new series of events that we're running and we're hosting at our own at our own office. We're calling it Newsroom 515. We bring in panel type discussion, but it's with a small, intimate group. The whole idea there is to be able to bring people into our space. You get to ask a lot of the questions. We then write stories based off that conversation. So you really get to be a part of that. And that's part of our mission to make sure we're touching our audience in a more engaging way, inviting you to be a part of that process as well. So be on the lookout for those. The next one of those will be in July. If you're not already a member, you can sign up at businessrecord.com/membership. All right, final question. Julia, I'll give you the first crack.
I'm going to cheat a little and say flexibility, both in terms of how you approach candidates, how you attempt to get them interested, but also I think we've heard quite a bit about this, but just to emphasize, one of the biggest ways you can potentially distinguish yourself from competitors in the hiring process is being willing to work flexibly with candidates about, for instance, are they one of the ones who wants pet insurance? Does this person want to work from home 50% of the time? And essentially being willing to offer tailored packages rather than saying that this is what we offer to people of your work experience and take it or leave it. Being willing to work with the workers to make sure that they are happy at your company.
Mary.
So I would hope 5 years from now that we're sitting up here celebrating that we are a leading region in how we have embraced, adopted, and maximized automation and AI within our businesses and our education systems. So if we look out about a decade or so, 25% of the jobs in the US will have faced high exposure to the impact of AI and automation. 36% will have experienced medium exposure, and 39% would experience low exposure. Point being, everything is going to, every job, every industry is going to be impacted by automation and AI. And it's here, and it's only going to grow more rapidly. So I hope we say we have been the best in the nation in adopting that. And I'll just put a quick plug out, if this is of interest to you, we start May 29th with a convening of area business and community and education leaders talking about what will our businesses look like, what will we need to be doing in our education systems to prepare not only the future workforce, but those that are currently in our workplaces. So if you want to join us on May 29th, see me after the meeting.
Tom?
I wish I was just starting my career, because I think the changes that are going to take place over the next 10 years are going to be mind-blowing. It's going to be so exciting. You think about the technology revolution and how it's going to impact every aspect of our lives and jobs. It'll be amazing. When I graduated, they said from college, they said an occupation would last 30 years. You pick a job, you'd be in that occupation, if you will, for 30 years. Today, that is 7.5 years. It's just the speed of change. So we're all going to have to get better at lifelong learning. And businesses are going to have to be cutting edge when it comes to developing and maintaining the relevancy of their workforce. And I hope in 5 to 10 years we are world class at investing and in developing our talent because we care about the learning process.
Matt?
Yeah, I would start by saying we're one of those companies that have pet insurance. And the the reason why it's successful and loved is because it was the employee's idea. It wasn't our benefits team idea. It wasn't HR's idea. It was the employees that came and said they wanted it. So it's something we were able to make work. So quick plug for pet insurance in there. As far as looking into that crystal wall, that 5 to 7 years, when I look at that, I think the most successful companies are going to have done two things. Every CEO or business leader, and it was evident by the jazz hands, as Beth mentioned, that they'll say talent is their most important asset, that the war on talent is extremely important to them, and it's something that they need to focus on. So in 5 to 7 years, the best companies are going to be the ones that invested in finding that talent, not just the talent themselves, but invested in the teams that find that talent, that have a talent acquisition function that isn't just facilitates and posts and praise, as we say in the industry, of like just throws a job out there and hopes the right people apply. So invest in your talent attraction team so they have the tools to go out there and find the best people for your roles. And the second one is to have engaged leaders with the hiring process, all the way up to the CEO. The companies that do it best and the companies that will do it best going forward are going to have the leaders that leverage their networks to help fill their open positions, that are out there at user groups, out there at networking events, and having that network to find the top people versus just relying on a posting. So those companies, to me, in 5 years are going to be the top companies, and they're going to have the most talented people.
Beth, final word?
So one of the things that we haven't talked about today are apprenticeships. And I want to give you just a couple of quick stats about Iowa, because we are really, truly one of the nation's leaders in terms of developing apprenticeship programs. We have more apprenticeship programs in Iowa than New Mexico, Maine, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, and Wyoming combined. We had more new programs, meaning newly created apprenticeship programs in 2018 than Texas, Florida, Pennsylvania, and Oregon combined. Those states have 67 million total population, and we had more apprenticeship programs created than those states combined. Most jobs are apprenticeship-able. And so if you want to grow your workforce, apprenticeships are a terrific way to do it, because you can design and structure the training model. You can get adults who need to earn a living while they're getting an education. It's basically a chance to try on the employee and see if this is going to work for you as well. And when they complete their apprenticeship program, they are more likely to stay with you because they work with you and they've trained you. And so don't think of apprenticeships only as being in the trades, because in Iowa we have advanced far beyond that, and we have apprenticeship programs in almost every industry and occupation. And I think that in 5 years is what we're really going to be talking about, and that's the way most people are going to be educated.
Georgia Van Gundy with Iowa Business Council also talks a lot about externships and the commitment their companies are making to that. We're inviting teachers into the workforce during the summer hours, so that could be another pool of candidates to help out during a period of the year. Thank you again. My name is Chris Canessa. I'm the publisher and executive editor for the Business Record. Our job is to help you do business better. If I can ever be of any help to you, if our newsroom can be of help, or our advertising team can, please feel free to reach out my way. And lastly, can I get a big round of applause for our panelists?